Orville considerately peeled shrimp for Charlotte right in front of me. Charlotte smiled sweetly and cooed a soft, "Thank you." Everyone else at the table quietly observed my reaction. Before I could say anything, his so-called white moonlight spoke up first. "I'm sorry, please don't be upset. Orville has always been such a gentleman." Really? But he had never peeled shrimp for me. In the past, when I asked if he could peel some for me, he would just frown and refuse without hesitation, his gaze even carrying a hint of reproach. "You know, I don't like the smell of shrimp." That one sentence always shut me up. But now, the usually aloof and proud Orville was patiently peeling shrimp for Charlotte. Looking at her features, so similar to mine, what more was there to understand? Orville furrowed his brows at her comment, "She doesn't know how to peel shrimp. Don't make a fuss." Charlotte smirked at me from where Orville couldn't see, as if triumphantly asserting her dominance. I raised an eyebrow and nodded slightly, as if genuinely considering her words. "Well, since you're being so chivalrous, I suppose I'll have to be a bit more gracious." As soon as I finished speaking, I turned and leaned toward his friend Reynolds in front of everyone. I reached out to adjust his collar, then gently wiped the corner of his mouth. "How careless of you, you've got something right here." Orville's face instantly turned cold. Reynolds was momentarily startled, but as he realized what was happening, his face flushed bright red. His cheeks burned, and his fingers fidgeted with the hem of his shirt as he stammered, Thank you." Orville watched the entire scene unfold with a dark expression. He even stopped peeling the shrimp. His voice carried a barely concealed anger as he gritted out my name, "Dorothy." I turned back to him with an innocent look. "What's wrong? Was I not gracious enough?" His fists clenched audibly, and his gaze turned icy. Orville's tone was laced with threat. "If you keep acting out like this, we're done." There it was again, his go-to move. I had chased him for 3 years, always at his beck and call, placing myself in the most position. So, in the past, whenever we argued or anything happened, the moment he threatened to break up, I would scramble to appease him. He was certain I'd cave this time too. But this time I didn't want to keep groveling. I let out a derisive laugh and slowly said, "Fine." At my response, a mix of emotions flashed in his eyes, anger, resentment, and disbelief. Before he could say anything else, Charlotte bit her lip and tugged gently at Orville's sleeve. "Please don't fight because of me. Don't break up over this, okay?" Her eyes were red and teary, looking pitiful and fragile. Orville couldn't stand to see her cry and immediately bent down to wipe her tears. He whispered soothing words to her, as if afraid she might shatter. Meeting Orville's reproachful and disappointed gaze, I lowered my eyes. 3 years. This was the first time I'd seen him so tenderly and carefully comfort someone. And that someone wasn't me. My heart clenched instinctively, but it didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. I realized that whether it was my joy or my sorrow, it was time to let it all go. I stood up to leave, pausing at the door to glance back one last time, holding on to a sliver of hope. But Orville was too busy holding Charlotte in his arms, whispering comforts, completely oblivious to my departure. My heart sank, and that last bit of hope was ruthlessly crushed. I turned and walked away. After returning home, I swiftly blocked and deleted all of Orville's contact information. Why should I cling to a dead-end relationship? Especially one with such a rotten foundation. What I didn't expect was that Reynolds would reach out to me first. "Reynolds, you're just going to use me and then toss me aside?" He even sent a cute crying puppy emoji. It was hard to imagine Reynolds, a tall and sturdy guy, using such an emoji. I apologized to him. He sent another message. "Reynolds, it's okay, I'm glad I could help. But I have a basketball game this week. Could you come cheer for me? I saved you a front row seat. Will you come?" He added an expectant emoji. After some thought, I agreed. For some reason, Reynolds had always given me a sense of familiarity since the first time we met. But no matter how much I tried to recall, I couldn't remember any past interactions with him. Suddenly, my phone rang, an unknown number. I answered. "You blocked me?" Orville's voice came through, his expression practically visible through the phone. "Yeah, so? Shouldn't I have?" My tone was laced with sarcasm. "Can you stop being so unreasonable? What more do you want from me?" I couldn't help but laugh. "If I recall correctly, we've already broken up." Why can't you be as understanding as Charlotte? His voice was filled with impatience. I was so angry I laughed. Get lost. I hung up and blocked the number in one swift motion. I picked out a figure-hugging short dress. I had a great figure, curvy in all the right places. Orville used to hate it when I wore clothes like this, telling me not to. At the time, I thought it was because he was possessive, a sign that he cared, and I secretly felt pleased, agreeing softly to his requests. But now I realized it was simply because Charlotte never wore clothes like this. Though Charlotte and I looked somewhat alike, her style and demeanor were more delicate and demure, while mine was the complete opposite. I tossed my long, wavy hair, full of charm and grace. Looking at myself in the mirror, I felt a sense of relief. University. By the time I arrived, the basketball game was about to start. As soon as I entered, I caused a stir among the spectators. The sunlight bathed my face, casting a warm glow on my porcelain skin. That girl is so pretty. Seriously, her figure is amazing. What I didn't expect was that Orville was also there. One of Orville's friends nudged him and gestured toward me. Wow, Orville, your girlfriend is stunning. He didn't correct them, instead striding over to me. His first words were accusatory. Why did you leave without a word the other day? Charlotte felt guilty for ages. I gave him a once-over. And? He paused. His eyes landed on my outfit, and he frowned. I told you, clothes like that don't suit you. I rolled my eyes at him and turned my attention to Reynold. Reynold noticed my gaze and turned his head. Our eyes met. The moment he saw me, his eyes lit up, a bright smile spreading across his face. It was warm, like a little sun. It was hard to look away. Smiles must be contagious because I found myself smiling back at him. Orville noticed something was off and followed my gaze. His eyes landed on Reynold, and his expression instantly darkened. You're here for Reynold? I shot back, are you serious? Who else would I be here for? You? He didn't respond. The game began. It was obvious to everyone that Orville was deliberately targeting Reynold. But Reynold handled it effortlessly, completely unfazed. He darted past a defender like lightning, lifted the ball high, and leaped to sink it perfectly into the basket. Reynold's team quickly gained the upper hand. As the whistle blew, the game finally ended. The championship was undeniably Reynolds'. I excitedly walked past Orville and handed Reynold a bottle of water. Reynolds' eyes, full of warmth, locked onto mine. He leaned down slightly, bringing his face closer to mine, and flashed a bright smile, asking with a hint of pride, So, how'd I do? His eyes sparkled like a puppy waiting for praise. I couldn't help but reach out and ruffle his hair. You were amazing. Amid the noise, I noticed Reynolds' Adam's apple bob, and the red on his ears spread to the tips. I chuckled and blurted out, You're so cute. Reynold was the easiest person to blush that I'd ever met. So. He hesitated for a moment. Finally, he said, I like you. Can I pursue you? His words caught me off guard. His breath grew warmer near my ear, his eyes filled with an unmistakable affection. Though I knew Reynold was Orville's friend, we hadn't been particularly close before. But I remembered that every time we crossed paths, he'd seemed a bit nervous. I wasn't sure why Reynold had suddenly developed feelings for me, but the love in his eyes seemed genuine. Orville's voice cut in at the worst possible moment. Dorothy, have you had enough of this charade? Orville glared at me, his expression dark as he watched me hold Reynolds' hand, barely containing his anger. How long are you going to keep up this ridiculous act? I turned to see Orville, his entire demeanor cold, with Charlotte standing behind him, looking smug. Orville gestured lightly for me to come closer. Come here. I can forgive you. If you want me to spend more time with you, just stop this nonsense. His last word carried a commanding tone. Charlotte stood behind him, one hand on her hip, her eyes filled with disdain. I glanced at Orville, his expression calm, not a hint of urgency. Of course, he'd always been confident when it came to me. Orville, wasn't I clear enough? We've broken up. I don't like you anymore. Now you can finally be with the person you truly care about. Aren't you happy? I tightened my grip on Reynolds' hand. To my surprise, he didn't pull away. Instead, he studied me for a moment, trying to find any trace of insincerity in my expression. But there was none. With that, I instinctively took Reynolds' hand and walked away. Hey! Hey! Reynolds' voice called out, and I turned to look at him. As expected, his ears were bright red. He pointed at our joined hands. I quickly let go, coughing awkwardly. He spoke first, "Can I really pursue you?" As soon as he finished, I focused my gaze entirely on him. Seeing me stare, he grew flustered. "Why are you looking at me like that? Is there something on my face?" Reynolds' face turned crimson. He anxiously rubbed his cheeks. I smiled and replied, "Sure." He froze for a moment, then nearly jumped for joy, beaming like a child. From that day on, Reynolds started bringing me breakfast, snacks, and all sorts of treats every day. His friends couldn't stand it and scolded him, "Dude, this isn't how you chase a girl. Other guys send flowers every day, and here you are without even a single petal. What girl doesn't like flowers? How do you expect to win her over like this?" It was like a light bulb went off in his head. From then on, I received several bouquets of flowers every day. My roommate stared at the growing pile of flowers in our dorm, stunned. "Does he own a flower shop or something? Sending this many every day?" One night at 11 p.m., Reynolds texted me asking if I was free the next day. After a moment's hesitation, I replied, "I'm free tomorrow." He responded quickly, "Great, get some rest. Don't stay up too late. Good night." I was taken aback. Reynolds had started texting me every night, and even during the day when we weren't together, my phone would be flooded with messages from him. Whenever I was sick or feeling unwell, he was always the first to show up. Once, I forgot to eat breakfast and ended up with stomach cramps, leaving me pale and sweating from the pain. When Reynolds arrived, his face was devoid of its usual smile. It was the first time I'd seen him angry. He scooped me up in his arms, both frustrated and worried, and rushed me to the hospital. On the way, my pain was so intense that my consciousness started to blur, but I faintly felt him gripping my hand and muttering, "Why do you always neglect yourself? It was like this before, and it's still the same now." From that day on, he started bringing me breakfast every day without fail, making sure I ate before he left. My roommates teased me, saying I'd end up being a husband-whipped wife. It made me think of my past self. I used to send Orville countless messages every day. And his replies were always just a single emoji. I remember one time when I had a fever and felt awful. I called Orville. What did he say again? "I'm busy right now. Stop bothering me." Then he hung up without a second thought. Later, I found out from someone else that Orville's so-called busy was actually picking up Charlotte from the airport. I realized that what truly broke my heart wasn't the incident at the gathering where he peeled shrimp for Charlotte in front of me. That was just the final straw. It's almost laughable. I chased Orville for 3 whole years. And we only lasted 6 months together before breaking up. One day, he showed up drunk at my place. He grabbed my wrist and pulled me into his arms, his breath reeking of alcohol as he whispered into my neck. His words were slurred, almost like a dream. But I still heard him clearly. He kept murmuring, "Charlotte." I swallowed my pain and reminded him that I was Dorothy, not Charlotte. He stared at my face for a long time, dazed. All he said was, "Let's be together." He didn't say he loved me, nor did he make any promises. It didn't feel like a confession, more like an order. Back then, I was too blinded by joy to question it. But now, looking back, everything made sense. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "I don't agree to the breakup. This isn't something you can decide alone. Stop being difficult. Charlotte is alone in this country, an orphan. She needs me. Can't you be more understanding?" Reading it made me feel physically ill. I couldn't believe I had loved someone like this for so many years. Truly, being lovesick is a curse. All my thoughts condensed into 2 words, idiot. After sending it, there was a moment of silence on the other end. Then came the reply, "You weren't like this before." I rolled my eyes and promptly blocked this number too. Early the next morning, I saw Reynolds standing like a statue outside my dorm, holding breakfast. He stood there silently, not making a sound. He must have been there for a while. I hurried downstairs. Reynolds' face lit up with a smile as soon as he saw me, his joy spreading across his features. I took the breakfast and asked, why didn't you call me to come down? He scratched his head, looking a little embarrassed. I thought you might still be asleep. I didn't want to wake you. I couldn't help but laugh. The sunlight filtered through the thin clouds, casting a silvery glow on the young man's face, almost dazzling to the eyes. Do you have any plans today? He asked tentatively, his tone cautious. Not really. What about you? My phone buzzed with a message. It was from my roommate, Hulda. Hulda, are you dumb? He's asking if you have plans, because he wants to ask you out. A date. Do you get it now? I could practically hear Hulda's exasperated tone in my head. I glanced up at the dorm window. To my surprise, Hulda and my other 3 roommates were all crowded by the window, watching us. As I wondered how they'd overheard our conversation, I suddenly noticed Reynolds' friend standing not far away, observing us. Before Reynolds could say anything, I cleared my throat, my cheek slightly pink. Let's hang out today. Reynolds' smile widened. Sure. It suddenly occurred to me that I've never actually been on a date, just the 2 of us, before. Back when I was with Orville, there were always 1 or 2 sisters around him. Later, when the sisters were gone, Charlotte became the person in between. I had wanted to go to the amusement park with just the 2 of us for a long time, but never got around to it. Now, today, that wish was finally going to come true. I dragged Reynolds to the amusement park, and in front of us, the roller coaster screams echoed one after another. I turned my head slightly to look at Reynolds' profile. He looked back at me with wide, innocent eyes, and a mischievous thought crossed my mind. Do you want to try something more exciting? Before he could answer, I grabbed his hand and pulled him to the roller coaster. Maybe because he often blushes and acts shy, I thought he might be scared. But after a few rounds, he was perfectly fine, not even a scream or a hint of fear. It was actually me who nearly lost my soul on that ride. He held me up, suppressing his laugh. Next time, I definitely won't ride the roller coaster with Reynolds. I thought to myself. We ended up trying nearly every ride at the amusement park. Our smiles seemed to be sewn onto our faces. It had been so long since I had so much fun. This made me feel an unprecedented sense of joy and freedom, and he felt like a little ray of sunshine, spreading happiness everywhere. By noon, we randomly picked a restaurant that had good reviews online. The waiter handed us the menu. Reynolds ordered the food. I was a bit surprised. Everything he ordered was exactly what I liked. Being cherished and prioritized felt warm in my heart. Orville, what's going on with you lately? A familiar voice came from the neighboring table, with a sweet, delicate tone. It was Charlotte, for sure. And the Orville she mentioned was obviously him. What a small world. I didn't turn around to look, pretending not to notice. Charlotte caught a glimpse of me, surprised, and walked over. Dorothy. What are you doing here? Orville followed behind her, his face cold. I felt my body locked by a burning gaze. I asked, why can't I be here? Did you book this restaurant? She looked a bit aggrieved. But this is a couple's restaurant. She glanced at Reynolds, her words implying something. I hadn't noticed when we walked in, but now that I looked around, the restaurant was filled with pink balloons, a couple's message wall, and pairs of lovers. It really was a couple's restaurant. I smiled and wrapped my arm around Reynolds. I'm here with my boyfriend. What's wrong? Do you have a problem with that? Reynolds' ears turned red. I could feel the cold air around Orville intensify. Charlotte grumbled something under her breath. You just broke up with Orville not long ago, and now you've already found someone new? I'm really envious. I caught a glimpse of the bracelet on Charlotte's wrist. I recognized it instantly. It was the same bracelet I had given to Orville for his birthday last year. To buy that bracelet, I had saved up for months, working several jobs every day. I was exhausted and lost a few pounds in the process. When he received the bracelet, his gaze was a bit complicated, but his tone was flat. There's no need for this. Don't buy it next time. I had worked myself to the bone, only for it to end up on someone else's wrist. Even though he didn't like it anymore, it still felt uncomfortable. I silently shifted my gaze away. I stopped paying attention to them. The waiter, sensing the tension, hurried over. Our restaurant is running a promotion. Couples who kiss can get a small gift for free. Hearing this, Charlotte hooked her arm around Orville's and smiled sweetly. calling his name in a girly voice. I want that gift. Orville frowned and shook his head, but when he saw me watching with an amused look, his fists clenched. Suddenly, he leaned down and kissed Charlotte on the lips, then looked up to see my reaction. I playfully pretended to gag, holding on to Reynolds' arm. Orville's face immediately darkened. The meal was definitely ruined. I linked arms with Reynolds and we walked out of the restaurant. As we stepped out the door, I heard the sound of a plate smashing and Orville's angry voice. I turned slightly to see him glaring at the wall, his fist clenched in frustration. After finishing our meal at another restaurant, we bumped into Orville and Charlotte again in the parking garage. I noticed the injury on Orville's hand right away. What a small world, running into the same people so many times in one day. I couldn't help but sigh. Just as I was about to get in the car, Charlotte suddenly ran up and stood in front of me. Do you think this keychain is pretty? I caught a gleam of smugness in her eyes. Raising an eyebrow, I replied, it's ugly, just like you. Reynolds couldn't hold back a laugh. Charlotte didn't expect me to be so blunt, and froze. Honestly, the keychain was really ugly. It was one of those things you could hardly bear to look at. Charlotte's eyes started to redden. Though Orville was still comforting her, there was a clear hint of impatience on his face. Just as I was about to turn to leave with Reynolds, Orville suddenly grabbed my hand, squeezing it so hard that I winced in pain. In an instant, Reynolds punched Orville in the face. Orville didn't expect him to strike in public and took the blow. But he quickly reacted and fought back, and before long, both of them were bruised. I shielded Reynolds, pushing Orville away with force. He probably didn't expect me to push him, stumbling back, his face full of disbelief and anger. You pushed me for him? I spread my arms wide, standing in front of Reynolds like a mother hen protecting her chick. Why can't I push you for Reynolds? You can protect Charlotte, so why can't I protect Reynolds? Orville, I know you like Charlotte, so I'm letting you be with her. But why can't you leave me alone? I'm not shameless. I'm not going to follow you around for the rest of my life like a doormat. At my words, Orville staggered, his expression complicated. He raised his hand as if to grab me again. I dodged it, pulling Reynolds with me as we left. At dusk, we strolled slowly down the streetlights casting a warm, yellow glow and stretching our shadows long. Reynolds asked me about all the grievances I had suffered with Orville. I told him the truth, no longer bothered by the past. I sensed that something was off with him. Just as I was about to ask, Reynolds suddenly wrapped his arms around me from behind. I was a bit confused, but didn't struggle. He buried his head in my collarbone, and after a while, I felt it was damp. Reynolds was crying? Reynolds hugged me, his head deeply buried in my neck, muffling sounds of sobbing. How could you let yourself get hurt like that? Do you have any idea how much it hurts me to see that? His voice carried a slight cry and frustration. Hearing him, my heart melted. I reached up and gently stroked his head. To be honest, I was a little shocked. A grown man crying like this in my arms was completely unexpected. After a while, Reynolds lifted his head, his eyes red and still damp. Here, he spoke to me, tears streaming as he described all the injustices I had faced before. I knew it wasn't really the right time to laugh, but he got so emotional while talking that I couldn't help it. I hugged him, laughing, thinking to myself how cute he was and how he cried more than I did. Eventually, he stopped crying, and we continued walking hand in hand. I asked the question that had been on my mind, why did you suddenly start liking me? He didn't answer, only saying that he'd tell me someday. That day, Reynolds mysteriously took me out. When I asked where we were going, he just smiled without saying a word. When we arrived at the destination, I immediately recognized the place. It was the orphanage where I stayed when I was a child. Actually, I am an orphan. I vaguely remember that on my 3rd birthday, my parents took me for a drive, and we got into a car accident on the way. At the time, my mom held me tightly in her arms, trying to protect me. In the end, both my parents died. After that, I went to live with my grandmother in the countryside. But just a few years later, my grandmother passed away. The elderly people in the village said I was unlucky and that I was the cause of my parents' deaths. Since I had no relatives, I was sent to the orphanage. My thoughts returned to the present. The place looked like it had been abandoned for a long time. The door was falling apart, and I could open it with just a light push. Reynold took my hand and carefully asked, "Do you remember this place?" Of course, I remembered, but I didn't understand why he brought me here or how he knew about this place. Reynold asked, "Do you remember the little chubby kid who used to follow you around here when you were little?" Suddenly, I remembered. When I first came here, there was a chubby kid who was always bullied by the other children. They would steal his things, throw his clothes into the water. I couldn't stand seeing him treated like that, so I would always chase away the bullies. I even told him to call me Big Sis and promised I would protect him from then on. I still remember the sparkle in his eyes back then. But after a few years, he was taken away, and a few months later, I was adopted. The figure of that person from my childhood overlapped with Reynold. Their facial features were so similar. I was a bit shocked. No wonder I felt a sense of familiarity when I saw Reynold. If I didn't know, it would have been hard to link the chubby, cute little boy to the man in front of me. Reynold led me to a wall. The yellowed wall had some childish writing carved into it, instantly bringing back many memories. It said, "I will take my little brother to conquer the world someday." That was definitely my handwriting. And below it, "I will go with Big Sis to conquer the world." I smiled. This must have been written by Reynold. Suddenly, Reynold hugged me from behind, burying his face in the crook of my neck. "It's not that I suddenly liked you, I've always liked you." I realized he was answering the question I had asked earlier. Reynold and I officially got together. After we returned, Reynold confessed to me publicly, and I agreed. Someone filmed it, and since Reynold was already a well-known figure on campus, along with the support of his friends, the video quickly spread across the school. The comments were overwhelmingly positive, praising our perfect match or sending blessings. Scrolling through the comments, one caught my attention. The comment read, "How ridiculous." The profile picture was an Alaskan Malamute. I blocked them immediately. My phone rang, it was Reynold's friend. He told me that Reynold had been injured while playing basketball and had lost a lot of blood. Hearing this, I immediately stood up and rushed to the school basketball court. As I left the dorm, I was surprised to see someone I didn't expect. Orville grabbed my wrist forcefully, questioning, "Are you and Reynold together?" I yanked my arm away, and sure enough, my wrist turned red from the force. It hurt. I coldly stared at him. "So what if we are? What's it to you?" His face darkened. "Is it really necessary to do this just to piss me off?" I raised an eyebrow. He still thought I was getting back at him? How ridiculous. "Are you still angry about me peeling shrimp for Charlotte that day?" "Fine, I won't help her anymore, but don't." I interrupted him coldly. Reynold was still injured and waiting for me, I didn't have time to waste with him. "Enough. I'm busy. I don't care about what you just said, and don't ever come looking for me again." Without waiting for Orville's shocked face, I turned and headed toward the basketball court. When I arrived, I saw Reynold surrounded by a group of people, his face cold and expressionless. It was as if the person who was injured and bleeding wasn't him. I walked over, and the moment Reynold saw me through the crowd, his cold expression immediately turned into one of grievance. He hugged me, his eyes watering, the corners of his eyes turning red with frustration. "It hurts so much." I gently touched his head and looked down at his injury. His calf had a large gash, with blood and flesh spilling out, and it was bleeding nonstop. Seeing the wound, my heart felt like it had been painfully twisted. "We need to go to the hospital." I gently helped him up. Just as I turned around, I saw Orville standing not far behind me. His whole body was filled with anger and disbelief. I ignored him and took Reynold to the hospital. The doctor was bandaging Reynold's wound when I received a strange text message. "You mean your busy time is spent finding Reynold, right?" It was clearly Orville. I replied, "None of your business," then blocked him. Once Reynold's wound was bandaged, I patted his head. "How did you end up like this?" Earlier, when I saw his injured calf wrapped tightly with bandages, I felt heartbroken. But after the bandaging, Reynold just kept staring at my face and smiling silly. I sighed, helpless. What could I do with my silly boyfriend? After sending Reynold back to school, I received a message from Charlotte. The last sentence was an invitation to meet at a cafe tomorrow. I didn't need to guess what she wanted. When I entered the cafe, I immediately saw Charlotte. She had completely shed the weak demeanor she showed in front of Orville and now looked arrogant and smug. She placed a bracelet in the most obvious spot and, seeing me sit down, immediately started to mock me. "You should recognize this bracelet, right? Does it look familiar?" I only mentioned it to Orville, and the next day he gave it to me. "You really like picking up other people's leftovers, don't you?" I leaned back on the sofa and smiled as I answered. In an instant, her arrogant face twisted in front of me. Charlotte's hands trembled with anger. She stood up and threw her coffee in my face. "Dorothy, why don't you just die? You broke up with Orville, and yet you still try to seduce him every day. I'm telling you. He only loves me." Charlotte glared at me viciously. I wiped the coffee off my face, stood up, and grabbed Charlotte's hair, slamming her head onto the table before delivering a loud slap across her face. Her face immediately swelled up. "Ah. I'll kill you. Ah." Charlotte screamed like a pig being slaughtered, struggling to free herself from my grip. Slap. I gave her another hard slap. Now her face was perfectly symmetrical. Charlotte screamed louder, attracting the attention of the staff. Seeing this, I poured the other cup of coffee from the table onto her face, grabbed her hair again, and slammed her to the ground. While Charlotte was still thrashing on the floor, I quickly left the scene. Back at my dorm, Charlotte sent me a barrage of texts, insults, mockery, and foul language in every line. I raised an eyebrow. It was a far cry from the delicate, weak persona she put on in front of Orville. I wondered how Orville would react if he knew his so-called delicate, kind Charlotte was actually like this. Since Orville found out I was with Reynold, he kept sending me messages from different numbers, standing outside the dorm building, never leaving. Having to deal with these two constantly was becoming really annoying. After thinking for a while, I requested the surveillance footage from the cafe where Charlotte and I met, as well as the texts where she insulted me, and I sent it all to Orville. I also sent Orville's daily harassment to Charlotte, along with a caption, "Control your ugly man, I'm not interested." After that, Orville stopped bothering me so much, and Charlotte rarely sent me nasty messages. As expected, they had a falling out. Every day was just fighting or heading towards another fight, and neither of them had the energy to bother me anymore. Without their harassment, I felt so much better. Every day, I either teased Reynold or played with him. It was so much fun. It was already starting to feel like autumn. The evening breeze was a bit chilly. It was getting late, so I tugged at my jacket and started heading back to the dorm. Halfway there, a shadow suddenly appeared beside me, and I jumped in surprise. "Dorothy, it's me." Orville grabbed my hand tightly, and the smell of alcohol hit me with his breath. I felt a wave of nausea. I've completely broken up with Charlotte. I was yanked roughly, almost stumbling into him. I held back my disgust and pulled my hand away sharply. "What does that have to do with me?" He clenched his fist nervously, his voice tinged with a bit of humility. "Dorothy, I was wrong. I'll never do that again. Please, can you give me another chance?" I looked into his eyes, not hesitating for a second. "No. Please don't come bothering me again. Really? You're annoying." Hearing those last two words, Orville's face turned pale. He bit his lip, as if trying to say something. I interrupted him. "Actually, you and Charlotte are really well suited. If possible, you should get back together and marry as soon as you can." I added silently, "So you don't end up hurting anyone else." Orville's eyes were red, terrifyingly so. I turned to leave. He reached out to stop me, but suddenly he was knocked off balance by a kick, almost falling to the ground. It was Reynold. Seeing him, I couldn't pretend to be calm anymore. I ran up and hugged him tightly. I turned to Orville without a trace of sympathy. "This is my final warning. Don't come looking for me again, or else I'll call the police. Stalking, harassment, it's really annoying." Orville stood frozen for a long while, before finally walking away, his figure retreating with a sense of desolation. After that, I never saw him again on campus, and the text stopped. I rarely heard anything about Orville and Charlotte either. The last time I thought about them was at a reunion years later, when I overheard some gossip. I heard that after Charlotte and Orville had fully broken up, she hooked up with another wealthy man. But this guy had a wife, and their affair didn't last long before the wife publicly beat up Charlotte and cut off her hair. Though the man did divorce in the end and Charlotte succeeded in her climb up, their marriage wasn't happy. Not long after, her husband started cheating again. As for Orville, not long after, his family went bankrupt, he dropped out of school, became an alcoholic, and ended up unemployed. Now, even getting enough to eat was a question. I just raised an eyebrow after hearing that, with little reaction. Suddenly, Hulda patted my shoulder and grinned, raising her chin toward the door. Your husband's here to pick you up. It was fine you left early to go play, but why do you have to leave the reunion so early too? I smiled. What can I say? I'm under strict management. It was snowing outside. As soon as I reached the door, Reynold walked up, draped another coat over my shoulders, and smiled as he gently rubbed my red, frozen nose. Taking my hand, he said, "Let's go home." End of story.